guys, welcome back to another episode of the Sheepdog Mindset. I'm Nick.
I'm David.
So we want to just get right into it. I know last episode we talked about the equipment for what we use for training, right? So like the simunitions guns that shoot the paint rounds. Well, we call it paint, but it's just soap and food coloring. But and then we talked about our shock knife, everybody's favorite,
Yeah.
and some of the aspects of reality-based training. I think this time we really want to get into a little more or dig a little deeper into the reality-based training, and the science behind it.
Why it's effective.
Yeah.
Why it works. So, so all those neat toys and stuff, they're fun to have, but I call them toys jokingly because it's equipment, and it's designed to enhance the training. The purpose of our training, the reality training, is to get those things that happen to you biologically to happen. You can simulate through stressful because you can get your heart rate up by doing a sprint or a whole bunch of different jumping jacks or up downs or whatever. But to have your heart rate spike because of the chemical changes in your body, other than having somebody point a live gun at you, we're going to have to find ways to do this. So that's what the equipment part of it was. So why do we want to have that biological change in our body and inoculate ourselves to that so that we can work through that? That's what we're looking for in our trainings. There's all different kinds of trainings, everything from tabletops all the way through live fire drills and things like this. The most effective training that I believe that you can do is stress inoculation.
Yeah, and that has to do with the force on force stuff, the one where you really feel or it puts in your mind that your life is in danger, right? Because we talk about stress, and I'm stressed because my kids were acting up, or I'm stressed because I got these bills I gotta find the money to pay for, or something like that. But that's not the kind of stress we're talking about in a life and death situation. That is a completely different type of response that your body's going to have to that stress.
Right.
What we call fight or flight.
Right. And I equate that too, and I teach this in my live classes, that if I tell people, like, if you're running late today and you're looking in your rearview mirror and you see a DPS trooper turn around and start running towards you, the light's not even on yet, what happens to your body? Your legs start going numb and tingling, your fingers tingle, and then when his lights turn on, your heart starts beating out of your chest.
Still happens.
Yeah. And why is that all happening? Because you think that the trooper is going to come up and shoot you? No. He might write you a ticket. The worst thing he's going to do to you, unless you got a warrant or something, the worst thing he's going to do is write you a ticket that you're going to have to fight, or maybe have a little hike in your insurance. That's not that terrible of a thing. Imagine if you did know that there was somebody that he was coming to kill you. What is your body going to do to that? And you can't control it. It's the blood recirculates in your body. It's the way God designed us. So we have to train through that. So we call that stress inoculation, or SIT, or reality-based training. So let's talk about how we set up a reality-based training. How do we set up a session?
And real quick, I mean, on that stress, like the reason to set up, we'll get into setting this up. There's a reason behind a method to the madness, as you will, because you have a certain response, and everybody has a certain fight or flight type of response. Everybody does. Sometimes people don't know what exactly they have because they've never been in that kind of situation, that kind of dire, my life is in danger, I need to do something. It's fight, flight, or freeze. So they're either going to take a stance and fight back, or they're going to run for their lives, or they're just going to freeze and out of panic and not know what to do.
Right.
So when we set these scenarios up, what David's about to go over, there is a reason we set them up that way, because I 110,000% believe and know, because I've seen it, that we can train ourselves to respond a certain way under that kind of stress.
And it's by winning those scenarios. We've seen people who have really just jumped right up and shined, even when somebody's physically attacking them. And we've also seen scenarios where a role player might raise their voice or "don't touch me," and somebody just deer in the headlights because they've never had that kind of confrontation. So you got to get yourself into that. So we base our scenarios based off of a response that we're looking for. If we are trying to train into their brain that they need to always be looking, always, don't get focused in on one thing. We'll decide what the outcome is that we're looking for, and then we'll create the problem. So we get the answer, and then we create the problem. And it doesn't always go as planned. And a lot of times a new lesson will come out of it or something. But for instance, if you wanted to have somebody learn to, after they pull the trigger, be looking around, give them something to look for. And it doesn't always have to be another gunman. It can be something. There's all kinds of things you could have in there. I don't want to give away too much, but we've gone so far as to use fake explosives in the rooms. We've had secondary gunmen. We've done all kinds of things that we haven't necessarily seen them happen, but we know that they're possible. And to exploit that weakness, so to speak, is a lesson that they will never forget. I remember a lot of things in my police academy. The one I remember the most is the one bad scenario that I messed up, and I'll never forget it. And it actually did end up helping me in my career because it actually happened to me in real life.
Yeah, and I think it's very important too that. So I've seen it time and time again where you have some. I don't want to. I'm not trying to bash anybody, but there are some YouTube instructors out there who have zero real world experience, or let alone the credentials to back what it is they're teaching. And what I've seen is that they set up these scenarios out of like a movie style type of mentality, and they're not winnable. Like
Right.
they're not winnable. Every scenario that needs to be done or drawn up is a winnable scenario. It has to be.
It
Right?
absolutely.
There has to be steps that they take to win that scenario. And even if the steps are out of order, or even if the steps aren't exactly what they should do, but still does the job,
Right.
that's a winnable scenario. And it needs to be that way because our goal is not to tear people down, to be like, oh, like you just suck.
Right.
It's to build confidence and to work the problem.
Right. A couple of things that we push on this is, one of them, like Nick just said, I'm glad he said it now because it's the right time to talk about. No ambushes, and it has to be winnable. And if for some reason they don't win the scenario, run it again. Don't even change it. Run it exactly the same way. They know what they need to do now, but they need to physically go through the motions of succeeding in that, because I truly believe that if you teach people that they just can't die, that they just can't die. This is one of the, I'm picking on one of his pet peeves is for you to go, oh, you got me, I'm dead. Oh, no, you're not. If you want to see Nick Guadarrama lose it, go to a scenario and say, you got me, I'm dead. We don't do that. This isn't cops and robbers playing in the backyard when you're 9 years old. This is reality stuff. This is things that happen in real life. And I know that from the friends that I've seen that have fallen, and others who have survived encounters, there's one in Fort Worth, like we talked about him. He got a bunch of holes put in, 9 holes put in, and he survived an unsurvivable shooting. And it's because he had the right mindset. He had the mindset to survive that encounter.
Oh man,
that's the type of person who, in a training scenario, will get shot right between the eyes and go, wipe that one away and keep moving. So you need to understand that.
Sorry, I just think he was helping officers treat his wounds.
Yes,
shot 9 times and helping other officers because he was a medic at the time. He was one of the directing other officers to treat him.
Couldn't hardly talk. Half his jaw was missing, and he was.
That's the kind of mentality that we want for everybody that we train and teach. That I cannot and will not die because you have a greater mission, a greater purpose,
right?
And that's to protect others, to protect the innocent, and that's what we do. We step in between, we hold the line. But more than anything, I think that the training, if you don't treat it as real, as if it's real, if we have that mentality, and he's exactly right. I will come include if you be like, oh, you got me, no, this is not paintball. This is not Nerf gun battle. This is, you train and treat these scenarios as if they're real. Because if you believe they're real, and even if you, let's say in this scenario, you end up getting shot in an arm or a leg or whatever else, you keep fighting.
Right.
You keep going. Because that is putting it up here in your mind that I'm not going to give up. I'm not going to die. Because the minute I say, oh, you got me, that's me giving up.
Yep, that's mentally giving up.
Mentally giving up.
And in real, the shootings that I've seen, and some of them, guys don't even know they've been shot for 5 minutes. They'll be like, he shot at me, but he missed me. And no, you have a hole in your shoulder. Oh my gosh, I sure do. Because their body hasn't registered that because of the adrenaline and all the things, their pain has been shut down. That can happen in real life too. So if you get this mentality of, if you nick me, I'm done, that's as weak as you're going to be.
I know an officer who was shot in the leg, had no idea he was shot, finished the mission, did everything he could. He's like, man, my leg's really hurting. And somebody noticed a spot of blood on his pants, and he looks down, and he was shot in the leg. And then all of a sudden, blood started coming out.
Yep.
Like his body wasn't even responding,
right? Because
his mind was no, I'm not. Until he noticed it and saw, then his mind's like, oh, you're shot, and here comes the blood flow. It's like, it's crazy. The mentality is so huge in this world that we have to train to win. There's
Right.
no other option. We train to fight and win.
So when you're doing these trainings, you're setting these up, be selective too about not just your equipment and your training objective, but who you allow to train. I was on a team with a bunch of warriors, guys that I trust in my life every day, and not one of them helped me train. They were good at police stuff. They were not so good at what Nick talked about before, which is you're training civilians. And one of the things you have to understand is when we're talking about role players or people that are going in there and being your adversaries, they need to understand the mission too. They need to know, you don't just tell them, hey, I want you to do this and this and this. You have to tell them, this is what we're trying to get out of this person. We're trying to get them to use their baton. We're trying to get them to vocalize or whatever it is so that they know the mission that you're trying to reach. And if they get this movie atmosphere that he was talking about where, hey, I'm going to see how many of them I can shoot, that's not a good trainer. That's not somebody you want to invite back to your training, because what they do is they defeat the person that they're training. And it might be fun for that role player, but it could cost the life of the person being trained.
Yeah. So, and a lot of times too that it's because what it is, if you get a bad instructor, and I'm not here to put anybody down on anything, and I'm definitely not better than anybody else, but we've both been doing this for a long time, and we have been able to develop certain training styles that can help kind of accelerate some of these people that have defaults in other areas. Some of these instructors don't know how to do that. Like they don't have the experience, or they don't have the know-how. And I'll tell you, because we've both been on both sides. A law enforcement instructor may not be a very good fit for a civilian instructor, and likewise, a civilian instructor not the same. But I've seen both. I've seen a civilian never in the military or law enforcement be a phenomenal law enforcement type of mentality instructor.
Absolutely.
And I've seen the other with law enforcement be able to actually teach civilians in a way that they understand, because it's like what we do in kind of the crawl, walk, run kind of method of training. But then we have to kind of, I guess, feather the gas on how hard we push some people, because they don't have a full academy that they went through.
Right.
Ours are very abbreviated, and we have to get a lot of information out in a short amount of time. So we have to make sure that what we're teaching is the important stuff, but also responding to how they're responding.
Right. You gotta understand that it doesn't matter who they are, military, police, they're human beings. When you go walk that stage and you take your oath and you swear in front of your friends and family that you're going to protect, that does not make you a good instructor. That doesn't even make you a good cop. It's a gift. I think we both have a good gift for instruction. I think we actually work very well together. I'm looking back over scenarios when we do our simulations days and our training days. I actually typically do not index a scenario until I get eye-to-eye contact with him to say, hey, we good? We both agree that the objectives are met before we'll index the scenario, which is to stop that scenario. You need to make sure that you've accomplished what you're trying to accomplish, and you also need to make sure that it doesn't start rabbit holing the wrong direction, because we've seen that before too, where we're looking for something and it starts going in a totally different direction.
It can be very, very counterproductive to the point where you're creating some massive training scars.
Right. So be careful for that. I'm trying to think of an example for that. We've seen scenarios where we've designed the action to work here, and all of a sudden we hear a lot of gunfire in the area where there should not be. And what that is a mistaken identity, and we have our officers shooting each other. It's called a blue on blue, and we do not want that. For one, it's expensive because that Sims paint's expensive, so I want to index that one quickly. But that's happened in the last few years where we've seen that happen. At several of our churches we've seen, and in law enforcement, when I went through SWAT school, we had blue on blue shootings, and there's no laughing there. You laugh, that's not a good thing. So we want to train that way. You want to be objective based. You need to make sure you get your objectives, make sure you use the right people doing the right jobs, and you're going to find as you do this that you're going to have some people that are just really good at certain things. I have my favorites for sure, and I'm sure a lot of them are watching right now, and yes, I'm talking about you, who are just good at role playing. They understand what we're trying to do. They make life easy for me. And then I have some that I'm like, I feel like I'm spending all my time just babysitting them to make sure that they're not hurting the officers.
Yeah, they always want to ad lib or go off script, and there's a reason. We tell, if someone's going to be a bad guy, this is what you say. This is what you're telling them, or this is what you're doing. These are your actions. There's a couple of reasons for that. Number one is we want the training to be equal across the board,
consistent,
right? When it's got to be consistent for everybody to get the same stimulus, because we're training a certain thing, and everybody a certain thing. So the other thing is that we don't want those training scars to develop in a sense that now that person is even more confused.
Right.
And if we stay on a script, we can better identify when it starts to go one way or another, and we can kind of adjust if we need to. But also by keeping it the same and having our role players stick to a script, we're able to control the scenario as a safety aspect.
Right.
Also.
Absolutely. As I was just about to say, the only time we'll change a scenario from the first to the last is if it's a safety issue. There's a scenario that we did where we had use of force options, and I decided to go ahead and throw a pistol in as a use of force option, even though we'd never done that, and it did not go well. And I said, that was a mistake. Let's take that out. And Nick said, nope, we can't. Yeah. We did one. They all get it. So we did. We don't do that anymore. But once you've started it, you really got to stay with it. So I would encourage you to dress rehearse your scenarios as well. Get your role players. We do some where they come out and it's recognition drills. And I want to see how it's going to look for the responder. So I'll be like, hey, I'm going to be the student. You guys come at me. I want to see what it looks like. Yeah. So I can make tweaks and adjustments before we get an actual student in front of them.
The instructors have to be able to, because there's multiple aspects to keep in mind, right? You have, and it's all numbers based on how many people do you have helping, how many students you have, all this stuff, and we're trying to make sure everybody gets the same information and the same training, the same stimuluses on these scenarios. And this is why scenario-based training, reality-based training, is a certain way, or needs to be a certain way, is to keep it consistent, but also. If you have certain learning objectives that you have to get to, if you have an instructor who doesn't pay attention to some of the ad-libbing, then it's different for everybody. Mm-hmm. And then the reaction or the learning objective doesn't get hit or gets missed, but they still maybe somehow figure out the scenario.
Right.
When we have certain learning objectives that we're trying to get them to for certain reasons, because there's a certain way, especially in the use of force, there's a certain kind of ladder that you have to follow.
Right.
You can't just, there are circumstances, we tell them that, to jump from down here to up here. But if we're trying to teach somebody who has zero experience, who has no idea about this world, and we're trying to teach them how to identify based on behavior, right? If we just throw some psychotic guy out there going crazy like the Tasmanian devil, well, then they have no base to go to a stair step to understand what levels they can go to from that scenario on.
Right.
Because now we just started up here. Well, they're going to jump to there every time.
Exactly.
We see it over and over and over again.
Not a good thing to have on your team. I think the last thing I want to talk about is the most important part of this, which we've talked about the equipment, we've talked about how to set it up, we've talked about how to run it. The most important part for me is the debrief. In debriefs with your teams, I have a couple of rules that I like to follow. One of them is there's no rank in a debrief. If there's a captain, they're the same level as the brand new guy in a debrief. Keep criticism positive. I noticed you did this. Maybe we should have done it this way or whatever. Not, hey, stupid, you did this wrong. And you need, as an instructor, if you're running a training like this, I like to tell them, this is what I saw. This is the things that were done right. This is the things that were done wrong. This was the objective I was trying to reach. And I typically, before I know they've already met the objective, so I can start all of my debriefs with, hey, here's what I was trying to get out of you. You survived. You found cover. You got your equipment working. All of you did that perfectly. Now let's talk about a few issues that we saw, and you talk about it. So they win the scenario. We can't lose the scenario. You cannot have a losing scenario. They win the scenario, and they know what they've learned, and they understand what they've learned and why it's important. And then it's going to stick with them when it matters. So that debrief, and this is where it just goes nuts. When we do it, I'll usually start off a debrief, and then I'll pass it on to him, and he'll say something. I'll go, oh, I remember this now. We will video a lot of our scenarios so that we can go back and show people, hey, did you realize that you actually jumped down and hid behind your wife? No, did I? Yeah, I sure did. It's on video. Ha, 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 don't do that. You're making dinner tonight.
Yeah.
So we like to, in that debrief, that's probably the most valuable thing you're going to do is to just talk about what you just did. So keep those.
Yeah, and then it goes back to you don't know what you don't know, and you don't know how you're going to react until you put yourself in that situation. And then when you do react, you don't know how you react sometimes because of how high your stress level might be.
Right.
So there has to be a bus driver, if you will, that can see that from the outside, take a step back, and they can talk about it, show different steps to take, how to make it better, how to make it work for you if that's what it is that you're going to do. But I really want to kind of emphasize this is just because instructors, and this is for you guys that have people that help out your churches or that that you bring in from outside. I really want to talk about just being careful and vetting those that you have and come and teach. Maybe your safety teams or anybody else, or maybe your families or any security type of stuff, because there's some things aren't necessarily appropriate for the audience, because
Right.
you do have there's some people out there that just can't physically or mentally handle more advanced type of tactics or techniques that is being already thrown or turned on through a fire hose.
Right.
So now you're talking about how much of that are they actually going to retain. And then that's why, again, we've been doing this for a minute, and there's a reason we do things a certain way. And I've seen lately, especially because in this realm, the security, church security, and in general, is there's been a major increase
Oh
in
yeah,
the last several
for
years.
sure.
But sometimes the increase, and again, my opinion, hate me if you will, but my opinion about some of the increases that you have anybody and everybody that's trying to put their 2 cents in um, into make an extra buck, or for the wrong reasons, and then they just flood this information without actually knowing the rules, regulations, and laws
Hmm.
around church security, not necessarily safety teams. And I know a church can have what they call safety teams. People call them security. Be careful presenting yourself as security,
It's
you
not
know.
legal.
And then what are you teaching? If they're not licensed security, what are you teaching room clearing for? What are
Right.
you teaching two-man team tactics, search and uh, uh, building searches and all this other aspects of this training? So just keep that in mind when you have people teaching you scenarios or teaching you reality-based training, whether it's using airsoft or whatever else. You know, legally make sure that you are doing your due diligence to make sure you're covered, because this person's just telling you a bunch of information. You're the one that's going to be in
Yeah.
that scenario, in that situation. You're the one that's going to be pulling the trigger if that comes to it.
Yeah. Gotta watch out for
So
the me show instructors. I see the guys that they really only want to instruct. They like the money, but they really want to instruct just to show people how cool they are, and that just drives me nuts because it blemishes our industry. And that's exactly what Nick is talking about: is those people that would come in and I can teach a bus assault or a dynamic entry, or there's things that have nothing to do with church security that I am authorized to teach. Am I going to teach it to church security civilians? No. Why? Well, there's a lot of reasons. I don't want them doing it if they're not supposed to be. They're not supposed to be doing it. It's not within the scope of their duties. The other is the liability aspect of it. If you're going to, as a church, not security but safety, teach people, you've given them a role and responsibility. That's going to fall back on you, not just financially and legally. It's going to fall back on you emotionally and spiritually if things go wrong.
yeah, and that's really where I think we kind of differ with some of these other instructors and some of these other people out there that are teaching some of this stuff. Number one, if anybody that knows us and knows the Sheepdog Defense Group, and the security companies, and even with PAC, we're not obviously doing this for the money, because we're not getting rich by any means. The other aspect is we're doing it as it's a passion of ours, it's a calling, and I truly believe that. But also, like, this is because we care. Like, we actually truly don't want anybody to
Right.
ever get hurt, let alone have to use the stuff we're teaching. So we're teaching this as a way to protect yourself, your churches, your flocks, to better serve God, to
Right.
better teach Jesus's teachings and what he stood for and meant. That's all it is. So if you have people out there that are really pushing to try to make this like about money, about
Right.
fame, about notoriety, about, oh, look at me, look what I do, look what I can do. That's the wrong reasons, number one. That's why we've been doing this for how many years, and we have yet to do really any advertising, any of that
Right.
stuff. It's a word of mouth. It's because this podcast is really information for you guys. We're
Yeah.
not getting anything out of this.
Uh,
This is something that we
we're not
felt
we're not getting
needed.
anything in that aspect. I can say in the 12 or so years that we've been doing this, what it has done is, man, it has secured my faith in a way like I
Oh,
cannot
100%.
describe. My relationship with Christ is 1,000%
Yeah.
stronger than it ever was. And not just because of the training, it's because of what we're doing. We're doing God's work and we're surrounded by God's people, believers. And it's just, man, my phone book's full of people who can I can call it anytime I want, and they will sit down and pray with me if I want to. It's garbage in, garbage out. You put gold in, you get gold out. It's the people that we're in this industry that we're working with has absolutely changed my life, and I feel real secure that if I get hit by a car tomorrow, I know where I'm going to be the next day now. Whereas before, I had a lot of question marks in my mind. So we're getting. I don't want to go too far.
Yeah, no, we're trying to get off, but it had to do. The reason I said that is because it had to do with the reality-based training stuff. I see a lot of trash out
Who's
there.
doing it? Yeah,
I see a lot of stuff being taught that has no purpose in the church. Has no purpose in teaching somebody that doesn't do this as a full-time job. You know, it's too much information. It's too much other things to think about. We need to focus on the bare minimum, the reality-based training stuff. Okay, if a guy walks into your church with a gun, what do you do? If you have two people that start fist fighting and one of them pulls out a knife in your church, what do you do? What are your options? You know, how do you mitigate that? Or how do I secure my facility? How do I make this more safe to never prevent somebody like that getting into the church? Yep. How do I screen? How do I identify? How do I talk to? How do I set up certain things that if something bad happens or the building catches on fire, we know what we're going to do. We have a plan. Yep. That's what this is for. That's what the reality-based training stuff is for, and that's what we do with Sheepdog.
Yeah, you got to get out of your comfort zone with it. Reality training, we're training for something that's not fun, so it shouldn't give you a good feeling when you do it. We talk about when we do our simulations day at the end of our security academy, we tell people this is family weekend. If you want to bring your family, that's great, but understand it may, especially young kids and things like that, our role players are going to be yelling at you, and some of them are going to use even some profanity. Nobody's ever going to kick in the door, come in and say, everybody get down, please, or I'm going to start shooting you. It's going to be nasty and violent and mean and bloody. And there are certain things we don't do, obviously, because it's still God's house. But we push that limit to try to get people amped up a little bit. And sometimes just as an observer, that can cause problems. So we tell people, hey, tomorrow's going to be kind of intense. So be selective about who you bring to the training to watch or to even participate in it. So, but you need to push that. You need to push that envelope and push it to a point of uncomfortable.
Yeah, and it needs to be because it's going to be. Reality is uncomfortable. Situations, violent situations, incidents like that are uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. So the more uncomfortable things that you can expose yourself to, the better stress inoculated you will be in order to solve that problem. And I think, with all the training, all the stuff, and that's another thing, we'll get back to reality-based training. It's all for that purpose of giving you, in a controlled environment, giving you just a Rolodex of scenarios and incidents that even if it doesn't happen exactly like that, but it's similar to that. Right. Well, then now that speeds up, and this is where the science comes in. It speeds up the decision-making process. Right. We talk about in reality-based training, and some people have heard it before or not, but the OODA loop, right? Observe, orient, decide, and act. So I see something, I orient myself to it, I decide what to do about it, and then I do it. And then based off that reaction, and it's just a constant loop.
Right.
But if I can absolutely speed the decision-making part up, because the number one thing that happens, we've seen it, the number one thing that happens in decision-making is the hesitation, because they just don't know.
100%.
They've never been exposed to it. They've never been that stressed out before. And that's why reality-based training is so important to us in doing what we do, is because we want those decisions to speed up, or you to have a selection of things that you can pull from your hat on, because this looks like I can do this, and then solve the problem without ever doing any of the other aspects of using force, deadly force of anything, or solving a problem before it even happens because you identified it, because it looked like something that could have been a problem and you stopped it before it happened.
Right. Yeah, just keep doing it. We I'll just call him out by name and he'd be mad at me. Mark Watkins is one of the guys that works with us. And he's a trainer, and he does a lot of role play for us. And sometimes he'll step in and be a responder for him. And I love messing with that guy. I will amp it up a little bit just to push him to see him fail, just because his reaction when he messes up is great. And he'll lose sleep for 2 days over it. But through that, he's gone from being okay to being a warrior, a trainer, and a leader, just based on his desire to train on that. So don't take the mistakes that you make as mistakes. And Nick said this halfway through this podcast. It's only a mistake if you don't learn something from it. Yeah. So expect to make mistakes. If you ever do our trainings, if anybody that's watching this has done our trainings, you've messed up. Everybody who's trained with us has messed up. But we've forced you to rise to a certain level to even let you work with us. And that's what's, to me, is important, because, again, to Nick's point, that loop's happening because you've inoculated yourself to that. I truly believe that God has put you in this position and put you through this training, this in case this day comes and you're the one that He chose to save that congregation, to take that action, to save that soul, or whatever that role is.
Yeah, and but we'll probably close here in a minute, but just to really reiterate that, something that brings me complete and utter joy in doing what we do is those light bulb moments.
Mm-hmm.
Those light bulb moments, or seeing a very timid, tearful school teacher become a warrior, a Xena, the warrior princess. I mean, just all out, just doing what needed to be done to protect herself, to protect kids, to protect the people that she's in charge of doing. It's like, because some of the churches we have schools attached to them, and that's a huge thing for us too, especially anything with kids in the school systems and churches and all the stuff that we deal with. To see those light bulb moments and to see the change that people, that happens with certain people, to becoming from, I don't know if this is for me, I think I'm just gonna give my spot to somebody else, to like,
nope,
holy cow, who is this person?
Yep.
Well,
I know exactly who you're talking about. And she'd be up. I'm not going to use her name because she'd kill me. But
she's scary now.
She can handle her business now. And there was that light bulb moment, and I was there. I saw that same thing. We see that a lot with a lot of people.
Yeah, we see it a lot. And that's why reality-based training is such a huge deal. It needs to happen more and more, and it should be a part of your training regimen, whatever it is. If you're with Sheepdog, if you're not with Sheepdog, vet it and get it, and make sure it's worth it. Make sure you're treating it as it's real and learning from the mistakes so that they don't become failure. I think that'll be it for today.
That sounds good.
Yeah, man, that was a good one. That was a good episode.
Got heavy.
So, hey, just like always, guys, you keep training, keep fighting, keep working. You guys stay safe.
See you next time.
All right.